Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bytes of Good Live. If you don't already know, this is our monthly speaker series hosted by Hack for Impact, a student-run nonprofit with the goal of inspiring the next generation of technologists, designers, and humanitarians to develop software for social good. Today, we have chapters across the country and even in Canada. Bytes of Good Live is an opportunity to engage in a larger conversation on how to critically examine the roles that technology plays in our society and explore potential career paths in the social good space. So if you are interested in learning more, you can find all of our past talks and podcast episodes as well on Bytes of Good. But today we are joined by Erin Stein here, who is the head of operations at Data Clinic's 2 Sigma, which is a pro bono data and tech for good initiative to speak on professional data and tech for good landscapes, tips for breaking into the field, and different things of this sort. But we'll start off with introductions, passed off to Erin for her presentation, and then open up for questions from you all. So as always, please feel free to send your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and then we'll get to them near the end. So with that, I can pass it to Erin with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Vera. It's a pleasure being here. Really excited. It's an amazing organization that you all run, and thrilled to share the insights that we have compiled over at Data Clinic with all of you, and hopefully inform your career as you guys move forward in your professional lives. So as we said, I am the head of operations at 2 Sigma's Data Clinic. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about the opportunities in this corporate data and tech for good space and how Data Clinic fits into it. So I'm going to frame today's talk in this concept of corporate social opportunity, which is kind of an evolution of corporate social responsibility, which is a more traditional term you might have heard of. This idea that companies should be giving back to their communities because it's the right thing to do. But over time, we've seen that it's actually very possible and much more beneficial when companies leverage, their core competencies, what they do well, and their people and resources to mutually benefit not just those communities, but also their business, their bottom line, their employees, and their stakeholders. It is possible to have everybody benefit from what these companies do well. And over time, I'm sure you've seen articles that talk about companies doing this specifically in the data and tech for good space. So you've got 2 Sigma here, IBM, MasterCard, Microsoft, really common names, right? We actually collaborate and connect with these peers on a regular basis. So you might think a lot of these companies are competitors out in the day-to-day world, but when it comes to corporate social responsibility or CSO, we share best practices and look for ways to connect and collaborate to amplify our impact on our communities wherever possible. And we meet with them regularly. And just this past year, actually, one of the things we produced together is called the Data and Tech for Good Landscape. And I can share the link for this afterwards. But even though a lot of these companies have been giving back in data and tech for a while, it hasn't always been easy to figure out exactly what companies are doing, how, who they benefit and partner with, et cetera. So, and this is kind of a result of this being a constantly evolving and expanding landscape to respond to the needs of the communities and to adapt to the advancing technologies that are out there. So we created this living document for companies to give more details on what it is they're doing in the data and tech for good space, how to contact them, what types of organizations they work with, et cetera. And to just give you a little snippet of this landscape, we have such diverse organizations creating really varied programs like the financial entity JP Morgan Chase, I'm sure you've all heard of. They, for example, run hackathons where students like yourselves can partner up with JP Morgan employees to help out nonprofits. So you get an opportunity to really connect with the skills that JP Morgan has on hand. Over at the tech company IBM, we have things like Call for Code, which is an opportunity to expand your skills by contributing to their open source projects. At Salesforce, software company, they have a CRM that's very popular, and you can, if you're a nonprofit, apply to get discounts or credits for their services. And lastly, we have a communications company, Twilio, that actually provides direct grants or funding to folks who are interested in using communications tech to advance their community. So every single program's different. Not every program or company provides the same types of programs out there. It's helpful to dig into the details. And now that we have this all consolidated in one place, what can we learn from this high level kind of bird's eye view? Well, even though there is such variety, we can kind of categorize the various programs into these categories here. So first, we have this consulting or access to skills that we saw from JP Morgan. It's very in line in the category that Data Clinic fits in. So I'll talk more about that soon. You can have access to resources like MasterCard provides access to their transaction data for researchers. Again, you can have credits or discounts from nonprofits with limited resources, perhaps direct funding and grants to organizations and individuals, and skills building for anyone from elementary school to mid-career folks looking to have a change in their professional life. So while, yes, there are a ton of programs, you might think, oh, there's so many opportunities for me to make this my full-time career. I do want to make it clear, though, that at the moment, still a lot of these programs tend to be staff or run by fairly small and versatile multidisciplinary teams. And there are a fair number that are still run by full-time staff that are just doing this in their free time, and they're kind of volunteering to run these. So there might be kind of limited opportunities to lead one of these programs, but they are all kind of fueled by contributions from the broader company. So even if you don't end up being like a manager or a director of one of these programs, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to be a volunteer and to contribute to the expansion, the execution of the work that they do. So make sure that as you're starting to connect with a company's interview, that you're asking about what opportunities there are, either in the leadership or contribution level. And the great thing about this is that it's so many companies have seen the benefits in this, that it's not just your household names like Google, Microsoft. You have those smaller outfits that are building up these types of giving back programs early on in their company's life cycle. So again, even if it's like a startup, start to ask them, do you already have plans to set up a data or tech for good initiative? Or do you have appetite for that type of work? That's something I'd love to contribute to, right? So there's going to be a lot of opportunities out there, and you might even be able to be someone who gets to establish or build one of these programs, which is a great segue to our work at Data Clinic, because that's kind of how we started. We sit within Two Sigma, which is a financial sciences company headquartered in New York. In fact, the majority of our employees are data scientists and engineers that come from non-financial backgrounds. So they're just excellent at creative problem solving and applying their skill sets to new sectors. And a group of these employees wanted to give back through that unique set of skills. And in 2014, established Data Clinic on a purely voluntary basis. They thought, let's try this out. Let's connect with some nonprofits, try to support them. If it works, then we can continue to expand. And today, we have a full-time staff that runs Data Clinic, of which I am a part. So we, like legal clinics, provide pro bono consulting or access to our skill sets, data science and engineering. And the teams that work in partnerships with these organizations are volunteers from amongst Two Sigma's full-time staff. Our core team leads and guides these partnerships. And we've also expanded into self-driven research and tooling to expand and contribute to the larger social impact space. And again, I'll give more details on that soon. So the core of our work, where we kind of were established, was this partnership work. And these collaborations can kind of break down into 3 phases. It's kind of like this 3-part story arc. And it starts off with the scoping phase, where we are working really hard to get to know these nonprofits. You know, what's their mission? What are they trying to achieve? For whom? Who's on their team? And what data and tech challenges are stopping them from doing everything they'd like to do for their community. So if we have the right skill sets within Two Sigma to address those challenges, we'll put together a tailored team for this project. We then will move into the actual execution phase, the research and development, where we're, analyzing their data and or open data, or we're building out some type of tool. But it doesn't just stop there. Once we've built the solution in collaboration, close collaboration with the partner's expertise, we want to make sure that they're going to be confident and comfortable using that well beyond our partnership. So there's this 3rd phase where we're working closely with their teams, transitioning management and ownership over to them, training them, making sure that they can use this on their own and interpret the results in a responsible and sustainable way. And we keep in close contact to see how things are going, 3, 6, a year, months down the line, a year down the line, to see what the impact is for their team and the communities around them. So some examples of these projects include working with a team of researchers out of Boston University and some of their peers. They were specifically looking at COVID spread on the African continent. And so they did a lot of research. They modeled the spread of COVID specifically for Africa's context. But they wanted to make their insights accessible. So we built an interactive dashboard that would allow decision makers in Africa to use their insights more readily. We also worked with Multnomah Water District out in California. They switched to digital water meters. We took that and were able to flag potential meter malfunctions or water leaks based off of each customer's previous usage. So this way they could prevent water waste and unnecessary bills. And it's being tested on the field right now so that we can work on validating and tweaking the model. One last example is with the New York Stem Cell Foundation out of New York. They do some really exciting, innovative research into treatment for the diseases in the world today. And they do this using induced pluripotent stem cells that come from blood and skin cell samples. And they've grown in the experiments over time so much that their software wasn't keeping up with the amount of data that they had to research. So we optimized the software that their team had built years ago so that researchers could more feasibly and efficiently visualize and assess the stem cells they were producing. And, these are great. We love these kind of one-on-one partnerships. It allows us to really get to know the org and tailor solutions specifically to their context and needs. And we're going to keep doing that. But the thing is, we know that none of these issues or challenges are ever entirely in isolation, right? There's always going to be some other organization in the world that has a similar problem, might not be the exact same one, but similar enough where they can learn from the solutions and insights that we produced. So we thought about this a lot. We established in 2014. If we look back over the years, how can we scale the solutions and insights that we accumulated over these partnerships so that more can benefit from this work? And I'm going to show you 2 examples where we have done this. The first comes from a partnership with Vera Institute of Justice, which researches and advocates for a more fair and equitable criminal justice system. They were looking at 911 call data and asked us if we could help provide insight into the national landscape of open 911 call data. It's a really interesting topic. We looked out in the interwebs and found 5 cities that actually do a pretty good job of publishing their 911 call data. But as we dug into the data that was available, we found that it just didn't quite fit Vera's needs and the research they were doing. We found, for example, when looking at the reasons behind a 911 call, that the categories were either way too broad and high level, so a complaint or environmental condition. What does that mean? I could complain about a million things if I wanted to. So if we look at one level down below that, we saw that the next level down was actually too detailed. So the opposite side of the problem. So here we have a vicious animal versus animal complaint. Vera didn't need to know the difference between those. So we had to find a middle ground. And we took things like vicious animal and animal complaint, combined them into the category animals. Now, because you might not want police to respond to that, but instead animal department at the city. So when we were creating these categories, I have to admit that we did this in a manual way. We were just thinking about the project on hand. So we had an Excel spreadsheet. We were copying and pasting and creating these new groupings. But in the end, that obviously wasn't scalable for us. We could do it for that one project because there was just a few cities. But we published our results afterwards. And if someone was going to replicate our research on a new city, we don't want them to have to do this manually themselves. And I mean, just in the last month alone, I've had several conversations with nonprofits who are maybe moving their legacy data to a new system, and they have to go through this whole cleaning process. And part of that is cleaning their old messy text data, creating more reasonable categories moving forward. So there's obviously need for this, and we would benefit too internally if we found a smarter way to go about this. So we created Musher, a way to consolidate messy free text data. And it kind of looks like this. There's a slightly different color scheme if you look at it now. But you create a project in which all the data you want to clean resides. Once you create the project, you load in your data. That could be local data sets from your computer, or it could be URLs. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible to help make open data accessible as well. At the moment, only tabular data can go in. We hope to expand that in the future. So contribution opportunity number 1. And once you have that data in here, so for example, 2 highlighted columns are call reasons for 911 calls in 2017 versus 2018. I want to make sure I have the same reasons no matter what year it is. So I'm going to group these 2 columns together so that I can make a single end-all be-all set of reasons for 911 calls. Once I dig into this combined column, I see all of the different reasons for a call. And let's see, I've got theft here as an example. I can create a mapping for that topic in particular. And I can just go through and click each of these reasons, these rectangles, and add them to this new mapping. I can also look in the bottom right-hand corner and get some suggestions from a word embedding algorithm that we also included in this project. So even though burglary isn't the same word as theft. There's still the same kind of concept. So it's going to suggest ideas like that. And I'm going to kind of condense all of the things that seem like theft to me until I'm all done. I'm going to keep doing that until I have a set of reasons for 911 calls that satisfy my research needs. And then I can export the results. Right now, you can export it as a JSON file and Python code snippet, so you can insert it into your ETL workflow and replicate this process moving forward. But we know not every organization has the technical capacity to ingest those types of output. So we also want to eventually offer this as a CSV file too. Because again, we do not want to limit access. The whole point of building tools like this is to empower people to use their data and find insights from their data. So future plans, love to allow people to kind of bring in geospatial data here, export different types of formats, and maybe improve our suggestion methodology too. And this was great because these cities all had this data, but a lot of times the problem happens before that. We might not even be able to find the right data in the first place. And one example of that is with our project in collaboration with Robin Hood Foundation, specifically their Learning and Tech Fund. And they asked us if we could identify characteristics of schools that were associated with their performance, and specifically in New York City. And we thought, yeah, we can do this. Even though we don't have access to, sensitive school data, New York City is rife with education data. So we turned to the New York City Open Data Portal, almost 3,500 data sets. And we thought, this is going to be a breeze. Wouldn't you know, it was painful. We got completely lost on there. Almost every school academic year, this data sets for like math test results were named different every time. And if we weren't using the right terms in our search, the results weren't showing that year's math performance. So if this is happening to us, a team of folks who use open data and specifically New York City Open Data Portal on a regular basis, what does that mean for the nonprofits who are looking for data but don't necessarily know what terms to use in the first place? Or any other organization out there, what are they finding and how are they finding what they need on this portal? So we looked into usage data and we saw, holy cow, New York City Open Data is very underutilized. Out of 3,500 data sets, only the top 20 account for over half the downloads and well over half the views. So tons of data is being totally forgotten, hidden away, never to be used or valued by anyone. And we think is a problem because there's a lot of value there. We saw this as a discovery or a recommendation problem. How can we help people see the value in all these data sets that exist but aren't floating to the surface? So we created Scout, another web app that hopefully helps people find and share data sets, interesting data sets on the portal. So this web app, it technically connects to the Socrata metadata API as opposed to going directly to like New York City itself. And from this, we pull the names of the data sets, which department published them, when was the last time it was updated, all this descriptive information that helps people understand what's there. New York City is not the only portal that uses it too. We got thousands of open data portals at various levels, from city to national data sets. So there's potential for this to scale too, if we do this well. So if I, for example, wanted to look up vehicle crashes and I found this motor vehicle collisions data set, then Scout over here on the right would first suggest data sets that have the capacity to be joined because they have similar IDs or columns. So this makes it easier. All data scientists out there, analysts would love this because it's going to be much easier to connect this data with each other. So I could connect crashes with vehicles and persons to get a pretty good idea of the events that were happening across the city. If I go to the next tab over here on the right, I see thematically similar options. And the first one, again, is that persons data we just saw, but below that is traffic signal data. So even though none of the words are in common between these two data sets, they're obviously in the same vein. I could look at crashes and where they occur related to traffic signals and see which traffic signals are, troublesome in the city. So by kind of thinking about this themed route of suggestions, I'm helping organizations hopefully come up with more robust and contextually rich analyses because they're adding in additional information they otherwise wouldn't have thought to add. So we didn't stop there. I also mentioned that we wanted to help people share this data. So you find a bunch of interesting data sets you want to show somebody. We also created the option to create collections. So if I wanted to do something on the arts, I could create a collection called Arts Survey, find all the data sets and add them to the collection using the button here. And then I can see, once I go into my collections, all the data sets that I had kind of bookmarked so I don't lose track of them. You get a URL, share it with anybody, and they'll see the same collection that you have there. So we're excited about these kinds of tools. We're hoping that things like this can grow and adapt to other use cases. And for Scout in particular, even though we built it originally on the New York City landscape, given that Socrata hosts so many open data portals, this could cover 145 portals. So rather than just looking up motor vehicle crashes for New York, maybe I take like the 3 largest cities across the country, find crash data in all of them, and I could do a cross-city comparison, see which cities are the outliers. How can I learn from the one that has the least crashes per capita? So I'm going from just over 3,000 data sets to over 125,000. That's really exciting. So we hope to soon be able to have this multi-city version of Scout out there. So between Musher, Scout, we have other open source products out there. Again, we're hoping that this is going to help scale solutions. We want other people to learn from this. We've already received a lot of great feedback on the open source repos we have out there. We have organizations that have applied the information in their advocacy meetings. We have students that have used it on their graduate research. And we have nonprofits that have used the tools already. We know some professors that have used Scout to create data set collections to share with their students. It's all really exciting to see these out in the world. And by creating this, we're helping to advocate for such a valuable resource in open data and in open source tooling, which can also help democratize the power, excuse me, behind data and tech. We're trying to make these as user-friendly as possible so that it's not just, the folks that have data scientists who are gaining the power and efficiency from analyses, but that any nonprofit, even with just kind of beginner skill sets, can hopefully benefit from them too. And last but not least, we don't want to keep reinventing the wheel. So we put something out there. We love when people contribute or build on top of it or expand it for their own applications. We're hoping that it's going to spur innovation when we build out in the open. So hopefully these kinds of projects have gotten you excited about a career with purpose, either a full-time job or being prepared to continue to contribute to projects like this. So some insights or tips on helping you do that. First is stay as excited and eager to learn as SpongeBob here. And specifically, the first suggestion I have is to try to expand your horizons wherever possible. Like it says there, nothing's built in a vacuum. Even if you're like focusing on education, you recognize that the way the students perform is related to their stability of their housing, the nutrition that they're getting. It's related to their family's job situation. It's not just an education question, right? So take interdisciplinary courses, think about cultural courses so you can understand the different communities. We're not just a monoculture anymore. We are a lot of different cultures that have come together throughout the world. So culturally, politically, philosophically, you want to have a good grasp of systems and how they interconnect. Next up, when it comes to trying to stand out from a crowd, in addition to having experience in various subjects, you really want to work on your communication skills. It doesn't matter if we're looking at candidates for a full-time position at Data Clinic, or if we're looking at our roster of volunteers and thinking about who would be best for this project. If you excel in communication, you're going to rise to the top. People who can communicate effectively and clearly a wide variety of complex topics to a variety of audiences are stand out from the crowd. So think about starting a blog. Even if no one ends up reading it, you are getting practice. You think about trying to explain something both to your dentist and to your advisor. You should be able to provide both technically complex explanations and more accessible explanations about the same content. And look out for opportunities like this to speak live to audiences. And as great as these projects are, there's a whole lot of legwork that goes into it before we can launch anything. And that's that whole scoping phase I was talking about earlier. It's that process of getting to know an organization, what they're trying to achieve, what their challenges are, who their audiences are, what are the potential advantages and disadvantages of executing a solution. So you should try to brush up on human-centered design principles. Think about how to create and design inclusive solutions with other groups. So you could connect with student orgs on campus, local nonprofits, and kind of go through this almost like an interview process to get to know them and think through with them what solutions might help them address the challenges they're facing, even if you don't end up actually working on those solutions. And then lastly, cannot talk about open source enough. It's a valuable resource, even if you work in a for-profit companies everywhere are using open source resources. So get familiar with the tools that are out there. And even if you're an engineer, getting some familiarity with open data and the challenges involved is incredibly valuable. It's, you can never have all the data you would ever need. Inevitably, at some point, any organization is going to bring in some open data for added context. So to get some of that experience, you can contribute to some of our open source tools. And on that note, ways to get in touch with us. The first off, we have our 3 URLs for 3 of our tools: twosigma.com/scout/musher/newerhoods. Give them a test, try them out, see what you think, and see what it's like to build a very kind of specific tool to meet a very specific challenge. And if you like what you see or you have feedback, head on over to our GitHubs. We love it when people contribute, so you can take part in development, take a look at our roadmaps that are in the repos, submit issues. And you'll see we have a bunch of other open repos there too, with other packages and like cleaned and compiled data that other folks have contributed to as well. And lastly, you can email us if you have feedback you want to share beyond submitting an issue, or you say this org might be a good candidate to use this tool. Let us know. We'd be happy to connect with them. At the bottom, you have our GitHub tag, our Medium site where you can read other case studies of projects we've engaged in. You have our email address, website, and Twitter handle. So with that, just want to say thank you so much. Again, Hack for Impact, you guys are an amazing organization. So fantastic to see such a large amount of students who are excited about, Tech for Impact. And please do not hesitate to reach out to orgs like ourselves and our peers. Everyone is so excited to continue supporting the next generation of data and tech for good contributors. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have about us, Data Clinic, our projects, or the sector at large, whatever you might have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Erin.
Yeah.
Turn this off real quick. Great. Yeah, thank you so much again. This was an amazing presentation, incredibly relevant for the work that we're currently doing with Hack for Impact and people's interests beyond that. But yeah, if anyone has a question, please feel free to post them into the YouTube chat. But I do want to start first by talking a little bit about, or asking about tech policy and just in general making an impact through data computing tech at large. This entire week thus far, we've posted our podcast this week. And so we've had a lot of discussions about the role that we are playing as technologists in social good. So sort of to kick off the question and answer, we definitely want to hear about what does computing or tech for good mean to you?
Yeah, so it's using the resources that are relevant to every organization in their specific context. Tech for Impact is often spoken up as this kind of like really pop science, futuristic concept. Like, how can we use AI or blockchain to move us to the next level? When really, I think it's just being smarter and more responsible about what's out there currently. I think there's a lot of challenges we still, like foundational challenges we have to overcome before we try to, shoot off to the moon in every single sector and every nonprofit. Oftentimes, the best solution for an organization is the simplest, the most straightforward, something that they can maintain confidently themselves. So I think it's just being smart about the resources and data and technology that are available, and making intelligent decisions with the folks who are actually going to use this information and these resources, and what works best for them. So it's really kind of like almost like a capacity building topic and impact more than anything, to make sure that everyone can have access to the same basic advances in data and tech. And then once we kind of can get everybody on the same playing field, then we can think about, okay, what next? But there's a lot of foundational work that needs to happen so that no one's getting left behind.
Gotcha. Yeah. And kind of on that question itself, another thing that came to mind was how does the underreporting or misreporting of data impact the work that you guys do? And what can technologists do to combat that?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. One of the biggest barriers that stops us from doing a project is the lack of data altogether. It's saying either literally the data doesn't exist or is not accessible to everybody, or it's only available at such a high level, like at the county level, that it's not really actionable for a community organization that works in a specific neighborhood. And then on top of that, if whatever data you have is inaccurate, you're going to have a very skewed interpretation of the context you're working in. Actually, one kind of good example of kind of this topic is our work with Robin Hood Foundation. So more details on that one is that they at first were identifying potential partner schools, looking at which schools were operating around the city average, meaning that if they're performing around the city average, then they were in a stable enough place that they could take on new programming. But if you take just the city average, then you're looking at comparing all these schools on the same playing field. So you're taking the school with the smallest budget and comparing them against the school that has a massive budget, has all the tech available for their students. So they obviously have a leg up. Is it fair to compare them apples to apples when you should actually take the context in which they're operating into account? And so what we did is we ended up factoring in school context, demographics, all these kinds of proxies for structural racism and segregation over time, and saw that we could say, actually, given the school situation, they're actually performing really well, kind of over expectations. So a school that might have seemed underperforming against the city average now is actually, we see that it's overperforming because it's overcome so many challenges. And by providing kind of the right information for the context, completely changed and opened up a lot more opportunities for a lot of underserved schools. So that's the kind of similar topic to this lack of information or underreporting. If you're working just purely off the data, using it as absolute truth without trying to take more context into play, then you're going to continue to kind of close doors to underserved communities. So it's important to work with folks to completely understand like the provenance of the data, how data was collected, so you can think about the various caveats you want to bring to your project or additional data that could help you get a more robust image of what's happening.
Thank you so much. Definitely something that people need to ensure that they keep in mind when talking about data in this way. Had another question about the role that technologists play in collecting data and just this kind of work in general. But beyond just getting these data sets into the hands of those who need it, what other ways can we ensure that these resources are accessible to people?
Yeah, there are a lot of elements of it, and actually some of it we're hoping to continue to add into, like Scout, for example. So just because data exists, like our Vera example showed, doesn't mean that it's in its current state appropriate for your context. Everybody has an agenda or a reason behind collecting data, and so the data is going to reflect the original purpose of the collection. So in order to make data accessible, you need to fully understand what the data is. And that means providing really thorough documentation and context and metadata alongside just the numbers itself. And so we have some roadmap plans for Scout where contributors can add in kind of notes about data sets or help to correct data sets or show like this is how this data set was used by creating as much peripheral information around that data set. So where it came from, why it was collected, here's how it's been used by these people for these purposes. Then you're lowering barriers for people who might want to use that data in the future because they see the limits, they see the possibilities, and they can make a more informed decision if it's the right data for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So we are at 45 minutes. Don't want to go a little bit too long. If anyone else has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But otherwise, something that is very current for a lot of our members who are going and working for large corporations currently. I know you touched on it before, working within corporate and trying to make an impact. But I guess, do you have any thoughts on how you suggest individuals voice concerns about impact not actually being made through these social responsibility initiatives? What can individuals do to make sure, an ethical, sustainable impact is actually being conducted here?
Yeah. So I think there's a few different levels, it's getting the full picture of what exactly your company's engaging in, understand, because for example, I mentioned we do a lot of work behind the scenes before we connect with a nonprofit to scope out the project, make sure it's going to be responsible, sustainable, all that stuff. So get to know kind of inside and out what your company is doing. You might not see all of it on the surface. And if you have a concern, it's always great to, make sure you have mentors at your place of work, someone that you feel comfortable talking to about sensitive issues, concerns you might have about your workplace. And they should be able to guide you with kind of the best appropriate approach for your workplace. Every workplace is going to be slightly different. But, no company loves somebody who just comes up and says, here's all the problems, and just kind of drops the mic. They want to see a solution builder, someone who not only recognizes a gap or an issue, but can also provide potential ways to address that. So if you think that your social good organization is not making enough impact or the right impact, or is only going a fraction of the way they could, think about what you would like to see. Like our data clinic came from the ground up. It wasn't the corporation saying you got to do this. It was volunteers coming together, designing a program and testing it out from scratch. And companies love to see that kind of initiative. If you and some other folks see that gap, write up a business proposal, and actually offer to try it out and kind of do a test case in your own free time and show them that, look, this is possible. This is the kind of resources we would need to scale this up and get more folks involved. And since there are tools like the Data and Tech for Good landscape, there's more and more information and case studies out there of this being done well and resulting in impactful solutions that you can bring that kind of information and evidence alongside your proposal to actually see change. So seeing the problem is just the first step. it's then trying to take action and be the change you want to see as the next.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great note to end on as well. If anyone has any further thoughts or questions, feel free to share. But we are sort of out of time. So thank you so much, Erin, for speaking with us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching our event here. We'll be hosting speakers monthly, but if you can't wait until then, we also have our Bytes of Good podcast. As I mentioned before, our first episode of the tech policy season came out this past Monday. So go ahead and check out our Spotify to check that out. And if you're interested in learning more about what Erin does at Data Clinic, we'll make sure to share all of the links to the open source materials, website links, and anything else, probably the presentation slides as well, to the Slack. So yeah, if you want to rewatch this event or watch it for the first time, we have all of the events uploaded to our YouTube. And thank you all so much for listening in. And thank you again, Erin, for attending with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Congratulations on all that you all are accomplishing. Excited to see what you do in your careers. And feel free at any time to reach out to me at Data Clinic. Happy to connect.
Well, good night, everyone.
Good night.